You're listening to episode 371 of the Major Issues podcast, and this one's a special one. It's the audio version of our Major Discourse interview with Joe Kelly, Spider-Man, I Kill Giants, Deadpool, Ben 10, and more. The Major Issues podcast starts right now! Hello, everybody out there in comic book land. My name is George Serrano, a.k.a. The Don, on behalf of Book Clique, and I am being joined here by Alex Garcia, a.k.a. The Cog, the comic OG. Say hi to the nice people.
Hello, everybody. How's everybody doing tonight?
Oh, it's a special night, ladies and gentlemen, because we have a special guest with us here today. One of the essential writers behind the Merc with the Mouth Deadpool, a product of the Stan Hatton Project, a literal man of action himself, the Giant Killer, Ben 10's best bud, the pride of Freeport, the astonishing, the spectacular, the amazing, the downright incomparable Joseph Kellington. At least that's what Wikipedia said, a.k.a. Joe Kelly. How are you?
I am great. Thank you very much. I love the shout out to Freeport there. That was very good.
Somebody's got to do it. Somebody's got to do it. I knew you'd be on. I was excited for this interview. I got my mascot on right now, my multiple ties. You know, I figured it would be fitting for this conversation here.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for giving us your time here. I know Alex had some questions up front that he wanted to bring up, so I will surrender the floor to him.
Well, Joe, you know, I got to talk to you about Deadpool. You know, that's what introduced me to Joe Kelly. I'll never forget picking up Deadpool #1 off that spinner rack and just being blown away by that issue. And seeing you come back to Deadpool recently with Deadpool Wolverine, I guess, would you call it World War III or is it WW3?
WW3, yeah.
WW3. And I was beyond excited for it, especially with it being timed perfectly with the recent Deadpool Wolverine movie. And I recently, of course, not recently, I got to read it. And you had said even from the beginning, don't expect WW3 to mean what you think it means. And I loved it. I loved the miniseries. You introduced so many new ideas. You still have so much to tell with Wade. You can still tell the love is there for him. Because to me, no one who has tackled Wade since you tackled him has truly embraced the emotional sensitivity of the character along with the comedic aspects. You know, no offense to those other writers. They love doing the comedy stuff, but your run has always had that beautiful weight on it of both sides. And like a lot of people love to reference certain issues. My issue on that run was when he finally has that conversation with Siren, where Siren basically tells him, you're not a good person. I don't know why I love you and I can't be around you. And Wade just sits there and shrugs and it's like, you were absolutely right. And it was such an emotionally damn, because it's not what you expect. It's not what you expect. And now in this new issue, may I have spoilers, Joe? Are you permitting me to say some spoilers?
I mean, this book's been out for a while, so yeah, I feel like you could spoil away.
And not just that.
First of all, I want to say that Haley Joel Osment can see dead people. I want to put that out there for new spoilers. I just want to go ahead and say that one. See, now I broke the ice, so you can go ahead, Alex.
So with WW3 meaning Wade Wilson, like the third copy, how did you come up with this idea? Like what drove this idea in your head? Because for me, another question just to follow up with this question is, I want to know who Delta is to you.
Oh, that's great. That's a very layered question. I should not have expected anything less. The highly layered question. First off, again, thank you guys for having me on and for all the kind words. I really do appreciate it. I love Deadpool. I mean, it's like I'm always going to love Deadpool, and cornerstone of my career and, absolutely one of my favorite characters. So anytime I get the chance to revisit it and revisit him, it is like you said, do I still have something to tell? Because over the years, people have said, oh, do you want to come back and take a stab at it or, do a stint on the book or something on the full title? And I just hadn't really had a vibe to do it. because I didn't have something to say. I wasn't really there. And then when Mark Bassos, the editor, he had said, "Hey, we're doing this, Wolverine Deadpool with a loose tie-in, to the movie." I never really got to write Wolverine for like a prolonged period of time. It's like doing that for a little bit of time with the X-Men was always fun. And I was always like, oh, it'd be really cool to write a Wolvie book. So that was sort of the first draw, was it's like, oh, if it's sort of Wolvie first, then I feel like a little easier about getting back into Deadpool. It's kind of like when we did Spidey and Deadpool. It was like, all right, this is going to be a very different take. Like what happens when you have two funny characters together. This one being more like, oh, what do you have? What do you get when you have the like two of the most broken people in comics, right, together? Especially guys who, one guy who Wolverine, who did a ton of bad stuff in his life, or was manipulated into a lot of bad things, and theoretically got over it, but always is still beating himself up, right? He's still always keeping that monster at bay. Mm-hmm. And Deadpool's really similar, except I think his emotional constitution he's honestly like softer, right? He's just not, he's dealt with a lot of pain, much of which I put him through, but he's dealt with a lot of pain, but he doesn't deal with it in the same way. He doesn't compartmentalize the same way that Wolverine does. Mm-hmm. So this idea of like, well, if you're somebody who's going to have an opportunity to sort of wipe away the last version of yourself because it's just too damn hard, and become something that's on the one hand sort of less monstrous, on the other hand more monstrous, who's the person that might bring you back? And it's like, it's got to be another monster, right? So that if it was like a pure person, like I think it would have felt really weird, or it would have felt disingenuous if the story was like Deadpool and Spider-Man, and you're watching Deadpool just sort of go into a dark place and Spidey pulls him out. That's why with Spidey and Deadpool, it was the opposite. I mean, that was the expectation, but instead I was watching what happens if Spidey starts to go down that path. Right. So then they had already had the title, like the title was WW3. And
really?
I honestly don't remember. Wow. I really don't remember this, whether or not they were calling it World War III or not. Or if they just said WW3, and I was like, what if it was Wade Wilson III? Does that get us anywhere? And that's where it all kind of sprung from that idea of like, if you sort of go, there was pre Weapon X Wade, then there's post Weapon X Wade, or Weapon X, and then you get to this thing, like, so that was where that gag came from. But and then, Delta is just, well, I mean, you and I have had, a lot of talks about comics over the years. And I think, right. As you've got I Kill Giants on in your background there, it's like,
is that what that is?
Yeah, that little thing. I often describe myself as like a shallow writer. And what I mean by that, I'm partly, being self-effacing, but it's like, whatever's in my head is what comes out. It's like I'm very much like what's happening in my world right now, and it winds up in the work. Sometimes it takes longer, but usually when I sit down and write something, it's because it's in my gut. So this idea of like, can people change? And like sort of, we were joking before we officially started the podcasts about like hot button topics of the day, but I think it's fair to say that we are currently finding ourselves in a situation where you might be challenged to look at people that maybe don't think the same way you do and go, are they monsters? Are they not monsters? Are they like good people that made a bad decision? Kind of doesn't matter where you are, right? There are some people that think there are people that are eating babies to get magic Hollywood powers, and there are people that think everybody else is doing hard. It's like, it's not about that. But it is about distrust, and it is about tribalism and going, well, those people are how they are. And we used to talk more about like, yeah, people can change if you give them the opportunity. So the idea that there's somebody who the villain who sort of went through their own tragedy, where the goal was improvement and making something better, and then losing their son as a result, and going, no, nobody should change. I don't think they can change. And I'm going to prove it to you, and we're going to make a sport of it. That's really where Delta came from. So, yeah, so very much just like living in, and, you know, obviously all the fun stuff of that book was going to be body horror. Like, only in comics can you have one guy grow out of another guy and fight. Like,
that was wild. That was absolutely wild to see. I did not see it coming.
No, well, I'm glad to hear it. And and Adam, you know, knowing that it was Adam Kubert, I mean, who's like, I love so much. You know, we worked together for a little bit on X-Men, and then, you know, I've known him for a long time, but you know, definitive Wolvie artist, right? So it's like there's no question it was going to be spectacular. And he's totally, you know, one of the things that I love, he is always down to experiment and try new stuff. So when it's like, all right, we're going to go for something weird here, he's like, sign me up. Like, he's in.
Yeah, I was going to say, he hasn't missed a beat. You know, a lot of artists, sometimes I can see it over time, because I mean, Adam's been in the business, 40 years?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And he hasn't missed a beat. I mean, some of those spreads where Wolverine has his arm torn off and it's just a bone on one side and he's just going visceral on the rest of his body. It felt like I'm looking at his art from 20 years ago. It was amazing. It was amazing.
Yeah, he's a killer. He's a totally sweet guy, and you know, I loved working with him. And one of those artists that you go, whatever I do, he's going to make it cooler. Yeah, it's like there's no question. You know, there were so many panels where I would describe some stuff, some of which we were not allowed to do, whether it was like, because even in a book like that, there's a gore threshold. But if it wasn't about gory, you know, like when Deadpool leaves this sort of really ham-fisted trail of breadcrumbs because he's hoping Wolverine will stop him.
Right.
When he finds the hotel room that he's trashed, it was definitely described as a lot worse that we couldn't do.
I would imagine.
Yeah, but Adam put in a ton of jokes then. You know, once we knew that what we couldn't do, he was like, "Oh, don't worry, I'll hook it up." And it, you know, when you look at that page, there's a ton of funny stuff in there, and that's just one tiny example. I mean, he's just a storytelling master. So it's that I knew it was going to be a lot of fun, and it's a great size for a story too. Like, I like you know, slightly longer miniseries, but if you're going to do a short one, that length was great. Like, I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, because the way I felt about Delta is I felt like Delta was you. You know, I felt like that was you kind of breaking the fourth wall, putting yourself in the book. Because even a lot of the things that Delta says, I felt like I could see or hear you almost in some level of frustration expressing the things that he was saying to the characters. You know?
It's funny you say that. I was just before I talked to you guys, I was talking to my son about One Piece. I've been reading One Piece from the beginning, and I'm like, I just got out of Wano. I'm like at 1,050 or something. I've been reading this thing now for a very long time, and we were just talking about how good Oda is at making. There are villains who are just flat out monsters. But most of the villains in that run, you understand how they got made. You know, like you don't have to sympathize with them necessarily or empathize with them, but you understand where they came from. And it's a whole worldview that's just based on like, yeah, really horrible systems that treat people badly create bad people. You know what I mean? Like it happens over and over in One Piece. And he's so good at it, you know, and characters, you're like, this is the worst human on earth. And then you'll see a flashback to why they got there. And they're still terrible, but their origin story is so tragic, you know? Right. And it's a long way of coming around to going, when I can, and I don't always do this. I'm not, you know, I'm not perfect, but I do feel like if you don't have a villain that's relatable on some weird level, you're kind of missing an opportunity, right? Because we want, like, Doom being the best example, probably, you know, certainly modern Doom, especially, where you just go, yeah, like, if one guy with all the power would just do the right thing, you'd have all the things and it would maybe not be so terrible. And, you start to go like, oh, I understand where he's coming from. Like it's, if you just got out of my way, I could fix everything. And then you start to see, oh, maybe he could fix everything. Right. It makes for a very interesting character. Because we all have said that at some point. Oh, if you just did it my way, it'd be fine. Right. So, so I'm sure there's something of me in Delta, but I do believe people can change. So that part.
No, definitely. It really felt like it was almost like your id.
That's entirely possible. I believe it.
Because even the character design, I looked at it, I go, is that your Joe?
That's funny. No, definitely not. That was hey, Adam, here, do what you want. I'm trying to figure out how to not just have the guy in the suit. What do we got?
Yeah, because he's totally got like the Joe Kelly 2.0 visor, the bald head and the beard. I was like, this is Joe. It's some of the stuff that he would say when he would interject between Logan and Wade. I could totally hear some of you saying this, especially when I think about how things went in the past with that X-Men run, which you mentioned. So I was like, oh, this is fun. That's
very funny. If that happened, it was definitely not intentional. I would cop to being like, oh yeah, I put myself in this. That was definitely not intentional. So now Adam might have been like, oh, here's a good villain. He's making me draw all this crazy crap. So I'm going to make him that.
Yeah. Like Joe's getting twisted. I think I know what's coming from. Cause this was a very visceral series. It was a lot of things happening in it that I'm just like, whoa, Joe, like what's going on?
Yeah, well, we definitely wanted to. I mean, once when I talked to Basso about it, I was just like, really, if we're gonna do it, like, can we go hard? Like, can we really go body horror and all that sort of stuff? And he's like, yeah, let's go as far as we can. And that to me is fun. I mean, I'm a big horror fan in general. And I do respond really well to the body horror stuff. I mean, sometimes it makes me squirm, but it's like in a good way. The Substance this year, if you guys haven't seen it.
Amazing.
I'm terrified to see that movie.
Oh, good stuff, man.
Yeah. And it's funny too. Like it just like it makes you laugh even with all that sort of body horror stuff.
Mm-hmm.
What's interesting
I just want to say,
oh, go ahead, brother.
No, I was just going to say one last thing about Wolverine Deadpool. I just want to congratulate you on the fact that it was on the top 50 sellers list this year. So congratulations.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you. I'm really glad people picked it up and gave it a shot. I mean, it's, some of these things, it's like, you think, not that it's a no-brainer is never the right word, but it's like, oh, okay, it's going to tie in, release at the same time as the movie. We'll draft off of some of that. It's Adam, I'm always like, yeah, it kind of makes sense. Somebody would pick it up. So it's nice. It's nice when it actually does work out that way. So thank you. I appreciate it.
I think it's interesting what you were saying about Delta and like the relatability of villains. In a past interview, you mentioned that your 2-part Rhino story that started in Amazing Spider-Man number 617 and ended in Amazing Spider-Man 625 was inspired by Darren Aronofsky's The Wrestler.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So with the success of like the current like solo films like The Joker and Venom and to a lesser extent Craven, what supervillain do you think could benefit from their own sort of film like that? Well, who do you think is not getting enough love or introspection in the comic book world?
That's a really good question. It's so hard because the way films have to compress things.
Yeah.
It's challenging to really get that full arc in, right? And I think some of the movies do it to varying, degrees of success, right? Mm-hmm. Also, people are kind of afraid to do like a flat out villain movie a lot of times, right?
Yeah. Not spoiler alert. I one of the things I loved about HBO's The Penguin is they kind of kept him a piece of trash throughout. I thought that was very cool because I mean ultimately they're not trying to change your mind on him. They've introduced elements that are sympathetic, but overall they're kind of just laying the lot of the land of the kind of person that he is.
100%, and that's a great example because they had room, right? You get like 8 hours to do that as opposed to what can we do in 90 minutes,
right?
And not that you can't. I mean, like I was just thinking how they just re-released 7 for whatever the
Yes.
30th anniversary.
Yeah.
And we saw it, and my son hadn't seen it, which was awesome to just get to watch it with him. It was super fun. But, you know, it's like you just shift the point of view, right? I mean, that's like the origin story of John Doe. And, you know, if it ended slightly differently, if he got away, it would be like, oh, okay, it would be his origin story. It would have been an incredible villain story. But gosh, who's really good for comic stories? I'm really curious to see how Lex gets played in the new, in the James Gunn Superman. Like, I think Lex can be such a good character, and I think he's been, certainly I love the Hackman version. It's of the time, and it's sort of funny, and also he's so sinister. Like, Gene Hackman was so good at being a villain. But gosh, who's really good? I mean, I love Kraven. Like, Kraven is a villain that I really think could be great. I didn't see the movie, so I can't say anything about it.
Fair.
I don't know. I have to think about it. Like, we've seen good ones, right? Like watching Magneto evolve, especially I actually like him in both series, honestly, like both sort of sets of the X-Men movies. But again, you watch him mostly over time, right? If you don't get those jumps over time, then it always feels like it's kind of short shrift,
That makes a lot of sense. Through my comic book reading and stuff, especially with the really fleshed out villains, what I've sort of figured out is that both heroes and villains both go through trauma. It's about the response to said trauma. Villains will go through trauma and say, this happened to me, therefore it should be able to happen to all of you guys. And heroes will say, this happened to me, so I'm going out of my way to make sure it doesn't happen to anyone else. Do you think that there's something to explore, like when with deep diving into these villains, or should they work better as just antagonists in bigger stories?
I think for me, when it goes to like the, certainly an ongoing book, there's room for both, right? It's they kind of go on a spectrum because, not every character, I'm going to pick on somebody like Polka Dot Man or, just random. Like, not every character has to have like a deep traumatic backstory. Although I think they did a really good job in Suicide Squad of making him understandable and relatable. But, and it can get tiresome sometimes, right? But if somebody's going to have legs and they're going to be around for a while, I do think it's important to sort of work some of that out. And we're not psychologists, it's like I'm not trying to figure out the way to go like, oh yeah, this is a textbook example of somebody with X, Y, and Z issue. Right. But I just feel like we've all been around bad things in our lives, and even if you lived a relatively, quote unquote boring life, something happened to somebody you knew, or something bad happened, or somebody died, or somebody's house burnt down, or something. And your imagination goes, oh, what would I do in that situation? And the more relatable that reaction is, I think then the better the villain is. So, serial killers and stuff are generally, as an example, you go, that's just like a literally broken human, right? Like their brain is wired so differently that you really can't just go, oh, they saw something terrible. Like something is functionally different about that brain. That's why they're so mysterious, and you don't really need anything deep with them, right? You just, it becomes interesting if you want to get into the why of the methodology, right? Like, we don't need to know anything about John Doe and Seven.
Right.
It's just like, no, he's using the 7 deadly sins as a map. We don't care. Like, that's not really what it's about. And he's stood out as one of these incredible villains over time. But I feel like if we're going to do a long story, we need a little bit more helps, and then sometimes you find out like, oh, you went the wrong direction, or it's a little too much pepper. Jeff Johns, when he took over the Flash way back in the day, he spent like that whole, I feel like it was the first year just building up the rogues gallery.
Yeah.
And there some really good stuff came out of that. Like I remember very much enjoying watching that evolve over the course of time and going, yeah, now I care about all those villains.
That was on the face of them, right? The boomerang guy and the top and all that kind of stuff. But like learning that they have a code, learning that they treat each other as family, like those little aspects there really helped flesh out those characters. So yeah, I fully agree.
Yeah. So for me, it's a spectrum. Like I said, there's plenty. It's fine to have a goofy villain. I love it. I don't really need to know like why Stiltman wants to do things. It's totally like it's fine.
Right.
Yeah. I feel like you need villains like that every now and again, though. You need those. To me, Joker's still just a psychopath. I know people have fleshed him out over the years, but you need those characters who just come along and go, I do things because I'm evil. Mm-hmm. You need that. You need that because it then becomes a matter of triumphing over evil, just right. Triumphing over evil, stamping it down, showing why the good guy is the good guy and won't get sucked in to these things. As corny as it is to see, man, why hasn't Batman just killed the Joker already? Because he's not a killer. He's not a killer. Right. You know, otherwise he's the Joker.
And I think another valuable reason for a character like that, that perhaps might be pertinent to some work of mine that's coming out in the future, is that sometimes bad things just happen to you, right? Like no explanation, no reasoning, like bad things just happen. And sometimes they're driven by humans. Mm-hmm. People get mugged, whatever. My nephew at one point, somebody loudmouthed him at a bar or whatever. He didn't even pay attention to the guy and he got like cold cocked and knocked unconscious. Like bad stuff happens sometimes.
Yeah.
Or, everybody who lost their homes in LA recently, right? It's like bad stuff happens. That to see how a hero deals with that and comes out on the other side, that's also valuable because we live in a world that sometimes stuff just happens. And I think part of the stories that we tell are to give a little bit of a roadmap of like, well, how do you recover from that? How do you move on from that? Obviously it's just, I'm not trying to equate like the stuff we do with really helping people out in the world. But if you buy that the sort of purpose of all drama is to simulate real life in a controlled environment so that we can, as a group, live through it, right? I mean, this is like the Greek definition of why we do this stuff. Then yeah, sometimes you got to have somebody drop out of the sky and level your house and then go, well, now what? And go from there. So that's sometimes you need those guys.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. You were saying that, you may not be, a philosopher and stuff, but I found myself I was going through a weird phase where I just didn't understand Superman. I feel like I didn't get the guy, and I feel like that's a lot of people's sort of take on him. Next year actually marks the 25th anniversary of Action Comics 775, which is still regarded as one of the best single issue Superman stories ever written. Looking back on it, have your feelings about the story evolved? Have they changed at all?
I appreciate you bringing it up, and I can't believe it's 25 years. Oh my God.
That's insane. Yeah, that's crazy.
I haven't written a single good thing since then.
Oh man. You'll get them next time.
Yeah, next time. Yeah, maybe tomorrow. It's funny. I every once in a while it comes up. So every once in a while I kind of look at it again and go like, I need to just see what I wrote, because I'm not I don't have an encyclopedic memory for what I wrote. Like I think there are people that do. I'm just not one of them. Which makes me feel terrible when especially if it's like a young fan who's like, hey, Ben 10 episode, or whatever. I'll be like, oh God, dude, I'm really sorry. I'm not the guy.
It's that Simpsons scene, right? Where they pick out the very specific, and they're like, I don't remember. I'm so sorry.
I feel really bad because I love how much, as a fan myself of many things, like how much we care about these things. But I just don't keep it all in my head that well. So every once in a while I look back at 775 and I'm still very proud of it. I'm still super proud of it. I think the message is still the message, and you're not, I think a lot of us don't. When I first got hired to write Superman, I didn't understand Superman, I was like, oh, this is going to be a fine job. Like, great. But I just thought of it as like, oh yeah, he's the prototypical superhero, like your the COG, he's the, superhero OG, and I'm like, all right, that'll be fun. I'll think about, really my introduction, even though I had some Superman comics growing up, was mostly the movies, so it was the Richard Donner film. but then living in that head and just being like, oh, and the world certainly changed quite drastically while I was on that book. I mean, I was on that book during 9/11, right? So it's like
Right.
you get to a point where you start to go like the idea of believing in ideals has to be treasured at some point. Like we can't look at that as so innocent and be so, like to the point where we think it's naive. Then that level of cynicism, and I can be a pretty cynical guy about certain things, but that level of cynicism for me is it's sad. Like it results in a world, like kind of a colorless world. Like where do you go after once you get to that point? So if there's any one character where you can just do that and just go like, yeah, he wears it on his sleeve and he believes in this dream and let's go, let's go. It's Superman. So I'm really glad. I mean, I'm super proud of that story. It was written oddly enough, a little bit out of anger.
Yeah, I was hearing about this, and now the authorities under the imprint or being re-released, these characters are supposedly making their cinematic debut soon in James Gunn's universe. So I think all of that is very ironic how all that came about.
Yeah, it'll be very, very interesting to see what happens. I actually have a ton of faith in James Gunn. I really I love his work. I think he's got a deep, deep love for superheroes. So I think he's going to get it right. So I mean that's my humble prediction. I'm certainly hoping. I mean I'm a fan, and I want this Superman to like knock it out of the park so badly.
I'm in the same boat as somebody who didn't really get the character. And then I said, diving into Action Comics 775 and, All-Star Superman, and just quick tangent. Like what a lot of people have asked me, like, why am I into comics? And they perceive that it's because I find hope from the heroes that kind of embody it, Spider-Man and Superman and stuff. But what I find is actually unique is that the hope that I'm getting is from regular people, the regular writers and the regular artists who live in the same kind of crappy world that I live in, but decide to give me a nugget of hope through this medium. Mm. And so, like, I feel like Superman has given so much to so many people. And in the recent years, it feels like he's kind of become one of the most misunderstood characters, especially with the rise of all the evil Superman analogs, right? Like Injustice Superman and Homelander or Omni-Man, even the Brightburn. You used to talk about horror, right. Brightburn kind of tackled some of that stuff. Is there, like, you were just talking about being excited for the James Gunn release. Is there something you think they need to nail there? Because I feel like even the last one wasn't necessarily the best embodiment of the Man of Steel, ironically.
Yeah. I mean, for me, like I said, he's got to represent hope. He's got to care about people. He's got to be honest, like he's got to be this, and especially today, I mean, it's funny. I just saw, I'm like everybody else addicted to social media. So I'm flipping through Instagram reels and a young guy pops up and he's like, just in case you didn't know, if you're complaining about comics being woke, DC Comics has always been woke. And he kind of goes on this whole thing.
Yeah.
But Superman as an immigrant story, I think is, even though obviously looks like, the most handsome white guy kind of scenario, like it can't kind of be, overstated that's a real thing and that's real DNA to that character. And so you take this character where America is his adopted home, raised with these ideals that are supposed to be universal and should be so simple, constantly faced with people that are disappointing and behave badly and all that sort of stuff, and just choosing to protect them all no matter what. And that's beautiful, it's like, and to be able to hold on to that in a way, you have to be able to sell it to an audience where it doesn't feel like fluff and it doesn't feel empty.
Right.
Like those things it does come at a cost, right? I mean, it's like people get killed for saying things like we all deserve equality and we all deserve to be treated fairly and stuff.
Who in history
That's
has
a point
been
of
killed for saying
contention.
such things?
Yeah, it's like,
Yeah, I know. I can't imagine.
what? Healthcare for all? What do you mean?
Yeah,
What's
exactly.
going on here?
But you know, this character gets to do that and not lose his way in anger, right? And stuff like that. That's and he can't be a saint. That's, I mean, this is the balance, right? This is why Superman is so hard. It's like he can't be a saint, he can't be a child. He has to be like a real person navigating the real world who just refuses to give up on humans. And that's tough because right now, I think a lot of us, even politics aside, like our worlds are getting so small, right? Because we're staring at phones all the time. I was thinking about this recently, where I read something recently where I just, you know, it's like, how many places do you actually go, like in your given day, right? It's like I barely leave the house. I never did because I'm a writer.
Right.
So I barely go anywhere. When I go out, I feel like, oh, this is so exciting and new. Like I never leave the house. But it's like you go to the same places, you see the same people, but that circle used to be bigger and we used to have different kinds of connections. And it just keeps getting smaller and smaller. You know, I was at the supermarket the other day and I saw, as a lady was going up to the counter to like buy fish, the guy was like, "Oh, I knew you were going to come. I saved the best cut for you," or whatever. I was like, nobody at this supermarket knows me. I don't know anybody here because I don't make the time to like get to know people and talk to them. Mm-hmm. My world has gotten smaller, you know. So we have to figure out how to make these connections, and these characters hopefully help us do that. You know, in their own weird little way, they give us a window into like, hey, this is possible. Like everybody's not your enemy just because they don't think like you. You know, that's the hope at least.
No, I dig it. Like I said, I've always found one of Superman's greatest strengths is his restraint. It's not that he doesn't have bad thoughts. It's not that he doesn't want to, enact things like revenge or feel those feelings. He's not letting those base emotions kind of overtake him. And with the immigrant story that you were talking about, I think one of the misconceptions is that because he is the most powerful person, seemingly on Earth, that he would then choose to use that power to fly above us when all he desperately wants is to walk among us. Like he just wants to be a human going to work, hanging out with his wife and his kid. And I think that's really the core of that character, is understanding that how with the immigrant allegory, this idea that he can almost be a better human than the humans born here, right? Almost be a better American than the Americans born here because they want it more, and he doesn't take it for granted what all this could be. So I'm really looking forward to some of that stuff being shown in James Gunn's Superman.
Yeah, I hope so. And it's funny because I know that when there will be people who, hopefully people who listen to your show are already fans and care about this stuff. But there's definitely people that are like, why all this highfalutin talk? It's comics. I just want to see somebody punch somebody with superpowers. But I think especially with popular art, whether it's TV, comics, whatever, there's a lot of room to do these things. And I think you can do them without it being super preachy, and they can be engaging and they can be fun and they can help just lead people to maybe think about the world in a different way. That's what I aspire to with this stuff. And if I have to just write fights, I get bored. Like I really get bored fast. If there's not a pot of gold at the end of this rainbow of like, maybe not learning and hugging. It doesn't have to be like full, Seinfeld level, but I need some real emotional meat and something that just feels like a human truth in these things. Right. For me, and even, One Piece being a great example. It's like, you can look at it and go, it's about a rubber pirate who punches people. Like, yeah, that is absolutely true. But it's also about friendship. And there's also a lot of politics in there. And there's a lot of stuff about freedom and defining your own self. And it's kind of remarkable after, 25 years watching him. He just keeps coming up with ways to illuminate human condition in arguably the goofiest way possible, and I love that. I mean, it's the great gift we get when we get one of the good ones, Right.
But we're talking to someone right now who has told many many great stories with, I believe Spider-Man is your favorite character.
Spidey is definitely my favorite.
It's definitely your guy. He's my guy. He's on my shirt right now. And you over the years have continued to come in and out of Spider-Man, especially ever since Brand New Day, and tell amazing stories.
Thanks.
And now you're in the middle of the eight deaths of Spider-Man, and it's talk about emotion, the emotions that you're dragging Peter through right now. I'm not gonna lie, it's kind of hard to read these issues. It's kind of hard to read some of these issues because I was expecting, funny enough, from that initial solicitation of where, Dr. Doom is giving Peter these powers. I was like, oh, this is just going to be like a fun magic punch him up story, and where he triumphs over these 8 potential deaths that he's going to endure. It's like, no, you're killing our boy Pete 8 times.
Yeah.
It's gut wrenching. It's gut wrenching, especially the last Scion that he had to deal with, that takes him through the deaths of all of his close family members, and that's the challenge. It's like almost like a Gom Jabbar challenge, right, that he has to go through. Joe, what's going on? Tell us, where did this story come from? Because I read, the Deadpool Wolverine. I'm like, man, that was this emotional, just visceral, great, gross story, basically. And now I'm watching Pete almost go through the same thing. Like that first time he's reborn.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh. I mean, you and Adam, and now you and Ed, you guys are like hitting on all cylinders with these stories. So how did this come about? What happened?
Oh, thanks. I appreciate all that. And thanks. And hopefully, I'm trying to, it may still get a little darker, but
darker?
I know if you could believe it.
I've been hearing that Mr. Kelly here likes to get a bit dark. He likes to kind of play around in a bit of darkness. So I was just rereading Deadpool Spider-Man, and he got drugged through the afterlife in that, and he's watching Gwen Stacy with a broken neck and Uncle Ben with a bullet hole. And I'm like, what is going on? I didn't remember this being so dark, but I think that balance is almost necessary. You go to the depths, so then when you break up that little bead of light that you end up going towards, just makes the journey almost better.
Yeah, for me that's the case. I do like the big extremes, and that's why Deadpool worked for me for as long as it did, because originally a lot of the pitches that wound up not getting accepted for that first my first run on Deadpool, it was like, if it was all goofy, that didn't quite feel right. If it was all dark, that didn't quite feel right. So it was that constant pendulum back and forth. And and I like to do that with everybody, certainly. And with Spider-Man, it's, we talk about it's always the impossible weight. It's just like this, it's him lifting up the building, basically, right? Mm-hmm. And how do you do that metaphorically? So that's not always literally that. 8 deaths, Nick, as often happens, when the guys at Marvel reach out, Nick is like, hey, so I have this idea. I don't know what it means, but I want to do the 8 deaths of Spider-Man. And I'm like, okay, cool. And then we started talking about what was happening in the universe with Doom and, all that stuff. So he had some ideas, and then I started, getting into it, and it was to run him through this gauntlet, for sure. And to start to, anytime there's a number in the title, I think you run into a danger of people, they're just like kind of checking off boxes at that point. It's like, all right, well, now we're up to number 5. And you may see shortly that things get derailed, which is all by design. But especially after this 65, like watching all these people die. Without getting super into it, this past year was a pretty rough year in my family, and we did have a lot of deaths, and watching people navigate that stuff and trying to process that stuff and what does it really mean completely informed this story. It's just like I said, it's stuff in, stuff out, and so it was like, okay, I'm not going to literally do things that were happen in real life. I got to figure out ways to, dramatize that stuff. But it is about like, what does loss really do to a person? What does it really mean to have your whole world kind of turned upside down, in that way? And then how do you get out of it on the other side? So on its face, it is like crazy magic Spider-Man story, right? He's going to have crazy armor, and Ed McGuinness is going to make him look amazing, and it's going to be super cool. And then but the centerpiece, it is the one that just happened was, when Sierra shows up with that ball, and it is this 65, it was going to be, okay, this is where the guts really come out. Cause the other stuff is super fun. Like I love doing the, like, can you shrink so small that you actually become big? Like that's, I love that.
That was
stuff.
such a fun story. That was such a fun story.
That's the chaos. And that's like, well, let's go Kirby and let's do like weird stuff. But then it was getting to this point because, all the characters are sort of coming at death in different ways. And, what is the value of a life? And, Sierra's like, you just make us play the stupid game all the time, like it's all, and what does Sidorak really want out of this stuff? Like, what is he even doing this for? And then, then I was like, okay, and then we're going to hit this part and that's 65. And I'm pretty sure what happens at the last page of 65, right? He's
65 deaths.
No, of this one that just happened. Like, yeah, the
X-Men, the X-Men show up at the
X-Men show up. Yeah, but and he's kind of Pete's out, right? At this point.
Yeah, he's still quit. He still wants to.
Yeah, he quit. Right. Yeah. Right. So he quit. Because I want to see what might break him, and it's like, and it's not just like the people he cares about, it's everybody. Like he literally hangs on and watches all these people die. So yeah, I mean, it's, I don't know if I'm really answering the question. He does get tortured for sure. But it is his capacity to care about people that's this greatest strength. It's like if Superman has that, it's just innate to his DNA of like goodness. And this is how I was brought up. And I believe in this dream of how people should behave. I don't actually think Peter had that, I think that his upbringing is really quite speckled with tragedy, and some of which arguably he caused, right? Like, right. Or if he didn't cause directly, are a result of choices he made or didn't make, or
right.
That's huge. And that is the DNA of that character, right? It's like, I didn't stop the guy who shot my uncle. Like, that's huge. And you don't want to hit the same, like, it's not about guilt, I don't think, for him, but it is about what is the value of your choices? What does it mean to make the decision? How do you get to great power and great responsibility in different ways? So that's, this is another way at that stuff for me, for Spidey, and yeah, it gets pretty rough.
Really, it really does. I'm also curious because in the initial solicitations for all this, I felt like it was pitched as a Joe Kelly, Ed McGuinness event, which for me is like, oh, this is going to be like picking up the first bunch of issues of Deadpool back in the day. When did, I believe, Justina Ireland, is that her first? Mm-hmm. Justina Ireland. When did she come along into this whole story?
So yeah, I mean, luckily she gave, Justina came to help us out, because what happened was, so I got hired to do 8 deaths, and that was totally exciting. I was going to write them all. And then I was at this Marvel conference, because we have these summits where everybody gets together and talks about stories and stuff. And Zeb Wells' run was wrapping up, and I kept hearing people talk, and I was like, well, who's coming next? And this story was the bridge between Zeb and whoever was coming next. And then I was like, they didn't know yet. And they had some feelers out or whatever. And I was just like, should I like pitch myself to maybe be the next guy?
Right.
And that wasn't met with complete, horror. And so, I threw my hat in the ring. I got the job, but because of the way you have to work on Spidey, because it's, bi-weekly, there was no way that I could do all of 8 deaths and get caught up to launch my run at the same time. So, so then we agreed just right up top, like, all right, we've got to split up the duties. And Justina came in, and which was awesome because she had to step into a story that literally was being built in the water. It's like the ship is being built in the water, and so, hey, I hope this makes sense. Let's try to figure it out. Bat some stuff back and forth, and she was a complete trooper, and really came in and kicked a lot of butt. So
no, she did a great job. I'm not gonna lie. Initially, I got turned off by it because I'm like, oh, who's this? I've never heard of her. I had to do some research, and I said, okay, let me pick up the issues, and she does a great job of just continuing that story. So I look forward to seeing more of what she's gonna do.
Yeah, she's great, and she's done a lot of like Star Wars stuff. I mean, she's done a ton of work. So yeah, super pro, super awesome. So I'm very glad that that we got to do it together. But that's why originally it would have been just me if somebody else was crazy enough to take on the book. But I decided to be crazy and try to take on the book.
So now is 8 deaths going to have a lot to do with your upcoming run?
Not really. Like it is a good bridge. But I wouldn't say that it like kicks off a status quo or something like that. Okay. It's kind of like it, because it was meant to be like, hey, here's this cool story, and we're having a lot of fun, and now something new will start. There's elements though, for sure, that sort of will draft their way in. Yeah, but that's about it. But it's definitely not like, oh, this story ends and then it's the next part. It's not. It's a pretty bright line, I think.
Got it.
Awesome.
I can't wait.
Yeah, you mentioned that you're taking over Amazing Spider-Man this April alongside artist Pepe Larraz. I hope I'm saying that right. And obviously JR. Does returning to this world, especially this character, feel like getting right back on a radioactive bike? Or is it more of a challenge to like kind of craft like fresh stories? Because I feel like with someone as big as him, you have a lot of masters to serve. Or is that something you kind of block out and just kind of focus on what creative direction that you want to go on?
It's a great question. And I mean, the answer is you do both. Like we sort of go, okay, what has to happen with this character, and what sort of, like I said, masters that you have to serve, like what elements of that. And then once that track is sort of laid, then I just try to ignore it like as much as possible. Like, not to the point where I'm like, oh, okay, screw you guys. I know we agreed on this. But it's like, if I think too much about that stuff, I jam myself up. Like I get jammed up if I get too heady about like the responsibility of working on a character that I love or any of that sort of stuff. And in fairness, like, yeah, there's always guardrails, on a character like this. But the goal, everybody has the same goal, which is like, let's tell the best stories we can tell, and let's have the most fun we can tell, and let's really try to give the reader a fun ride, and that's that's the goal. That's what we're trying to do. Pepe is unbelievable. Like, he is so talented. I can't stand it. Like, it's the kind of thing that like when I get the pages, you open it up and it's like, I feel like somebody punched me in the chest sometimes, because I'm just like, oh my God, like that's so much better than I even had in my brain. Right. And he's such a good storyteller, and he does this incredible acting, and, action is dynamic, and, it's very cool. I know that it was funny when I was hoping to try to get the gig and I was looking for people, I'm like, wow, it'd be really cool. This guy, Pepe, like he's really, and it just so happens that he went to school with Ken Nomura. So I met Pepe last year. He hosted a panel for us when we were promoting Immortal Sergeant out in Europe. So I got to meet him. It was real nice. And
Nice.
Ken is like, oh, Pepe's very good. He's very good. He's a very mainstream artist. He's very good. I was like, okay, cool. And then I finally saw his work. I was like, oh yeah, this dude is really good. But I didn't know him, really. And I didn't know if I could reach out to him. And then it turned out that that's who they were going to ask anyway. So like that was just complete fate and luck and awesome universe being kind.
Awesome.
And then, JR, it's like classic, man. It's like,
Right.
he's awesome. It's such a cool, it's cool to work with people who you have been aware of for a very long time.
Does Little Joe get excited in those moments?
Yeah, big time. Yeah. It's so fun. It's so fun. It takes me back to so much stuff that, that I read. It's funny. I'm a little bit younger, than he is. I certainly don't want to, make him sound like an older guy,
Right.
but somebody who's been drawing for such a long time has had such a humongous impact on comics, and certainly an impact on me. So yeah, to get to see that stuff and to go like, oh my God, there's the JR, it's like, it makes me super happy. So, yeah. And he's a cool dude. Like, so yeah, it's an embarrassment of riches right now. I mean, it's just so many talented people, that I get to work with. So, I'm thrilled.
Yeah. Nice.
Awesome.
But you brought up Immortal Sergeant, which is a book I definitely wanted to, plug in here because I find it very interesting. I Kill Giants, I felt like when it came out, especially in trade, once it was collected, everybody was talking about it. The emotional impact of the story, Ken's art is so, especially at that time when manga was really starting to come into the American influence. So that this style with American storytelling, with the emotional backdrop, I still love rereading I Kill Giants and still getting that feeling of, oh no, she's really a superhero, and then finding out, no, this is just someone who's going through some heavy emotional baggage, and, then recently reading Immortal Sergeant, which it was a very exaggerated story, but it was still grounded. Like you still knew, okay, there's nothing magical that's going to happen here. It's nothing like that. This is a life story, and it's a story of someone who's been hardened and, is dragging his son along for this ride. I'm like upset. I feel, and you tell me if I'm wrong, that this book just doesn't have the attention it needs. I feel, because I'm not trying to be controversial. I just feel like people don't care as much about male emotional hardship. You know what I mean? That's how I feel about it. That's how I feel about it. Because that's a story about a guy who, when you become a police officer, I believe most people do that because they want to protect people the same way superheroes want to protect people, want to save people. But then over time, you kind of get hardened to this just, beat down piece of meat, and now you're ending your career and you're like, how do I deal with this? And for me, as someone who has been in law enforcement, knows a lot of people in law enforcement, in the military, George, thank you. You did your time. Mm-hmm. I really would love to see this book become a book that people use as a way of dealing with their PTSD or a way of dealing with the hardships in their lives, especially if you live in this sort of life. But it doesn't even have to be about that. It could just be about a relationship between a father and a son. Right. And learning how to deal and accept one another for who they are, and seeing as much as that's difficult it could be, the good in people. So I was just wondering what kind of response has it gotten since it got collected? Are you and Ken going to do a third story? I would love for you guys to do a trilogy. What's going on with Immortal Sergeant?
Oh, thank you, and thanks for all the kind words about it. Yeah, Sarge is obviously very special to me, and Ken worked really hard on it. I definitely wish it had gotten a little bit more love for sure. I feel like when people read it, they're like, oh yeah, I really like it. And word of mouth is helping it, but it's not, it is a slice of life book, right? For lack of a better term. And that particular slice of life is, a guy and a cop dad. And, I know you and I have talked about this, but I mean, when I was working on that book, during like Black Lives Matter summer, right? So I was having my own internal like, and I wanted to write this story for, I think the first notes on this story are like 15 years old. I mean, there's somewhere, it's a long time ago. I mean, my dad died 17 years ago. So it was something that I cooked up before that, actually. And it was like, oh, I'm never going to write this. Because it was a little too emotional. Because he was a cop, and the circumstances of the day of my birth are dramatized in Immortal Sergeant, but they're based on something that happened to him, well, on the day I was born, and how it impacted him as a police officer on the same day that his kid was born, Right. And I didn't find that story out until I was like 19 or 20 or something. It was like this crazy it wasn't a family secret, but it was like a discovery, Yeah. So I wanted to write that story for a really long time. And then Ken and I did Giants, and I love Ken so much. Like besides being such a talented guy, we're very good friends and somebody I really care about. And life just kind of got in the way. So we just didn't do another book right away, which is my fault more than Ken's. Ken, I'll always take the blame for being too slow.
I told him you said that.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. He knows, trust me. And so, it had been a while. And so if thankfully people do find I Kill Giants. And if that's your expectation, and then you go like, oh, there's another book coming out. And it's like, yeah, it's a slice of life story with this like kind of racist, kind of homophobic, like old asshole. It's not I Kill Giants. So it's not the sequel you were looking for,
No.
But it is that story. So hopefully people will find it. We are going to do another book for sure. I'm not going to wait 15 years in between. So that's good. No, I promised Ken, I was like, I will start it. And I actually have started. I know what it's going to be about. It actually does have sort of more magical elements to it this time. And it'll probably be, it is, we always joke about it being this Long Island trilogy because all these stories take place in sort of weirdo Long Island. Ken's, I don't even know if he's ever set foot on Long Island, honestly. So I always send him.
I was going to say, I was like, wait, I didn't know he was from New York. I was about to say.
No, he lives in Tokyo. He's
Right.
If not in Tokyo, he's in Spain. He bangs back and forth. But but yeah, so we are going to do a third one. It probably won't be as long. We wanted to do like a sort of more decompressed storytelling with Sarge. I always forget the title. It's That One Summer, or This One Summer, was a book that we were both looking at. He had introduced me to it, and it was just very atmospheric. It's a slice of life story, and it's like you get to breathe in the pages a little bit more. So that's kind of why Sarge is so open and big. I think the next book will be a little bit more compact, because I put Ken through a lot. It was a lot of drama.
It's quite fun. It's great. It's a great book, and I tell everybody about it. So
thanks.
Can't wait to see more from you guys.
Yeah, I think when the three are together, it'll be kind of nice. People get to see that. Oh yeah, these two knuckleheads told us a couple of stories. Let's see if they're what they're like. But I think this third one will be a pretty nice. Actually, I have a feeling it's going to be a good bridge between those two in a weird way, even though it's the third book. It will have magical. Yeah, I'm using the term magical, but it's got magical elements. It's very grounded. Also, it's a lot about friendship and how people remember their lives basically as we move along and what we forget. So it's. I think it's going to be. I think it's going to be pretty cool. So one day I'll get my butt in a chair and write.
What are you doing? What are you doing out there?
Yeah.
Too busy hanging out with Flavor Freeport,
That's
yeah, exactly.
Freeport's very own. So Man of Action, an amazing concept, bringing all these creators together to put out some amazing work, things like you were just talking about, reaching a whole different audience, through animation and through film. You've worked on an impressive myriad of things like from media, print, video games, television, feature films. Which would you say is your favorite to write for? Like, what is your different approaches for each one? I guess I'm trying to get at.
I'm so honestly so lucky to have gotten to do any of it. You know, it's when I went to school for writing, it was for graduate school, and then so there were like 20 of us in a class, you know, because it was a graduate program, and I know not everybody got to write, you know what I mean, and here we were like the launch pad of NYU, you know, not everybody got to do it. So I mean, I constantly have to remind myself like, wow, I've gotten to have a really, really good life, and I've gotten to tell stories for a long time. So I'm so grateful for that. Every medium is a little different. It's funny, you can actually pick up some really bad habits in comics if then you go to screenwriting, you know, because comic scripts are very loose and you can describe every book on the shelf if you want. And then you get into the movies and it's like, how quick can you get to these pages? We have to, you know,
right.
I don't care about what's on the bookshelf. It's don't tell me, don't direct from the page, all this stuff.
Right.
But I don't know. Like, I think the writing, I was trained to write movies, so I loved that format. I loved script format. So my comics look like movie scripts, honestly. They just have page breaks in them to indicate literally which page you're on. But I try not to name the panels. You know, like I don't usually go panel 1, panel 2, panel 3. I just try to let it flow. Which in each block of text, sort of the artist knows like this is the panel. But if they want to break it up. Like that's one of the most exciting things about comics. Comics is so, you know, short of writing novels, it's the most direct conduit from the writer's brain to the audience, right? It's me, it's an artist. There's an art team that's certainly bringing their stuff to life, but it's a pretty direct channel, you know, and especially if you work with, you know, with the right people, you know, if I work with Ken or, you know, when I work with Max Fiumar, it's like, you know, Pepe, it's like people that are just like reading my mind and they're showing it on the page and they're fast. And that's a great thing. You know, it's like, even if you're doing your own comic, you can do it and then put it out and it exists in the world, right? You don't have to wait for permission, which is really cool. As soon as you get into animation and film, it's a lot of waiting unless you're willing to do it on your own. And in that case, live action is obviously easier in a lot of ways than animation because the amount of skill and, you know, it takes to actually animate something well.
Right.
That's a lot of man hours. You know, it's a lot of man hours. So, but you know, when I got to do I Kill Giants as a feature, that was a really huge moment for me. I mean, to get to, you know, besides the fact that it was the story I loved, to get to work with actors and the director and bring that thing to life, that was incredible. It was really incredible. Animation is, the writing of it is pretty quick and it's really fun because you're usually in a room with people and you're doing a bunch of collaborative stuff. And then it takes, you know, a year to see something, right? You know, it's, if you're lucky, it's sort of a 9-month turnaround. And there are ways, obviously, you know, South Park does an episode in a week. I mean, there's ways to do it. But if you're a normal production, there's a way we do it. It takes a long time.
Matt and Trey are going to cancel us now. We
let out their secret.
Yeah, no, there's a whole documentary. It's okay.
Yeah.
But the thing that's amazing is that if you get the right thing, you know, like we've been lucky, and a couple of times, you know, Ben 10 was lightning in a bottle. I mean, that was just the right time, the right people, the right market, everything. To be meeting people who are now in their, you know, young 20s being like, dude, that was my childhood. Like that's a gift. That is such a gift, you know, because I know people did that for me, right? And it's like to be able to go, oh wow, because I don't, you know, I think it's fair to say that our comic book market has aged up. I know that there are kids that read comics, but I think in general, we're an aged up market. I think that's changing, which is good. You know, thank goodness there's stuff like Dogman and things that are getting kids, right? Like we want kids reading young so that they want to read Spider-Man and not just watch the shows. But But man, is it awesome when you go like, oh yeah, we made this thing for a kid and the kid loved it. Generator X is another one where it was just like not the same audience base, right? I mean, also because we were banned in some countries because we were too scary. It's awesome. When
Is that what happened?
Germans?
Because I was gonna bring up Generator X. As much as people want to see Ben 10 come back, Generator X never got finished.
Yeah,
and it was such a great story. It was banned.
Oh yeah. We did not make it on air in Germany because it was too scary. Wow. You scare the Germans. You're working pretty hard.
That country.
How do you scare the Germans? How do you scare the Germans?
Yeah. Yeah, we pulled that off.
So I'm gonna time travel. And I'm gonna give FDR Generator X to say, look, the war will end. Just show them this, and that's it. The war will be over.
It was pretty. Yeah, it was scary. There's some places that didn't go, but it was also we were taking our shot at a more mature show, right? It was like a bridge show to try to get to an older audience, and that comes with different kind of stuff, but. But yeah, so writing for those is, it's fantastic. So I just love storytelling in general, but it really is more I think it's the relationship with the audience is what's different. It's like if movies are a community experience, like you're in a theater and you have that whole I'm here with other people and you hear them all breathing. Like when you watch I Kill Giants with a bunch of people and everyone starts crying at the same time, you're like, I did my job, right? Like that's a great moment. Or just, you go to the Substance and you watch with people and then people are like, oh my God, they're all freaking out at the same time. They did their job. I love it.
100%.
Cartoons and comics, it's like, it's a little more personal. Like cartoons are shared, kids talk about it at the playground, like that whole experience of like, what for sitcoms is like used to be the water cooler effect where it's like, oh, what happened on Seinfeld? Now we're all talking about it. Right. So it's cool that you get to be part of their sort of, their zeitgeist, like their internal like group and who gets to be which alien when you're playing at lunch and all that kind of stuff. That's amazing. And then comics are just like so personal. Like, even though we're lucky enough to live in the age where we can all be nerds out in the open and it's not just us like talking to our with three friends about to read comics. It's like a thing people talk about now. It's a real personal connection. And so when you get that, it's why the fans are so passionate, whether they're happy or sad. It's like you get some very strong feelings because it's you and that book, it's a direct connection. That's mainline. That is some serious stuff. So all of them have their advantages and disadvantages, but I'm sorry, I'm rambling too much. But
no, this is great.
It's a long way of saying I don't really have a favorite. I'm trained to think a certain way. As long as I'm writing visually, I'm pretty happy. It's just how quickly can you get to the output is probably where I would, go, oh, okay, comics are fast, movies are slow, animation is slow, but the impact can be huge. Yeah.
Right.
That makes a lot of sense. With one of the things that I realized with comics that's different from those other mediums is the pacing, right? Because you're doing it through the art, you're doing it through the words, and there's always that heart-stopping final page, right? You turn it to reveal, or it's to be continued, or something like that. Do you have the sort of Alan Moore vision of like, my books are my books, and if you choose to adapt them, like they'll never reach those heights? Or do you think that there's a way to kind of translate some of that pace or some of that intensity over to feature films?
It's a great question. It's I don't have as hard line as Alan Moore does. He's got a real that's a big brick wall. And I get it. He had some things he didn't like the way they were adapted, but it's I agree that it will always be a different experience. Like you're just not going to catch it. And it's the same. Anybody who's ever read a book they like, not even a comic, right? A novel. And the instant you saw the casting, you're like, well, it's not how I pictured the person in my head, right? Even if they're great, it's like Henry Cavill as Superman is it's almost as good as a human being as you're going to get. And then there are people who be like, well, yeah, but he looks too buff or he looks he's too handsome.
Right. I've heard that one too. So I'm like,
yeah,
oh, okay.
It's like, okay. So yeah, I do kind of agree, but that's the beautiful thing. Like when people get out of joint about an adaptation or um, whether it's a creator or a fan, it's like the original exists. Like you can always have the original. Just go back to it. It's fine. It's interesting when the adaptations work. Like One Piece being an example. Like people obviously love the anime and they really like that live action show, even where it diverges, and because they caught a spirit, and you felt like Oda was involved. And um, I know it's a very different experience, but I can enjoy them both. So yeah, I don't know. It's I'm never anti. It's like we also have to acknowledge like we work in a small medium at the moment. Like comics are, even at their best, what are we selling? Like a couple 100,000 copies at the best,
Right.
top, right? And
Yeah.
let's assume that's not variant covers and just collectors who are slabbing them and people that are reading them. You put a show on Netflix and 7 million people see it.
Right.
That's, it's kind of cool, and so if that story, as long as it doesn't lose the heart of whatever it is, or the horror, then I'm like, great. And maybe it drives people back to the source material and they get to check it out. So yeah, I'm not anti. It's always going to be a different experience, but that's cool. As long hopefully the creators are involved, right? That's the main.
Yeah. You always hear the horror stories about them being on the outside and kind of having to watch their properties, characters, storylines kind of get mangled in some cases. I was, not for nothing, but with certain Batman and Superman films that have come out lately, the books that they were grabbing off the shelf, I was very interested that they were going right there immediately, because I feel like it misinforms the characters and the feel and that spirit that you were talking about initially. But then you see certain things, and I know it's a bit controversial to say now, but like I loved the Sandman Netflix adaptation, and it just had the feel of those books, and I think it made more fans. And you kind of have to take that chance, that gamble, so long as you're not compromising the core of what it is you're trying to say and what the work is supposed to mean.
Yeah, I think so. And I think, it's funny to me that the modern audiences, people are so media savvy in terms of how a thing gets made, that I'm always shocked now when they go like, oh, why did they cut that? Or why did they compress that? Or how come this character looks different? It's like, how things get made, right? Is the story still good? Like, is it still the heart? And that, that's what you're talking about. And I think as long as that's there, and preferably the creator is involved, and preferably the creator's not a creep for various reasons. But yeah, it can still be good. It can, I mean, there's so many people I think come to stories through anime.
Yeah.
That never read the books, right? And it's like they will live and die in the hills of those anime. Right. And then it's like, oh yeah, but did you read it? Did you check it?
This comes from something. Yeah.
Yeah, it came. Most of them do, right?
Yeah.
Right. And it's like I'm reading One Piece because it was I don't have the time to watch 1,000 episodes of anything. Right. Like that's a big ask, but I can read pretty quick, so that's why I chose to do it. But yeah, it's like, and then you can get into the gatekeeping conversation. I don't think anybody should be gatekeeping anything. It's just like, let people like what they like. If you like the movie and they like the book, you guys can still be friends. It's like, it's okay. Just let us all enjoy the things we like.
That's fair. That's fair.
Very fair. And, you kind of been already hinting at almost getting at my next question, is the overall current state of comics. And I really believe we are on an upswing overall. I mean, to me, the stories are more creative than ever. They're the artists that they're pulling out. You talked about Pepe Larraz, Rafa Sandoval, the Marco Cicchettos, all these amazing artists, the storytellers, the Jeff Johnses, the Jason Aarons, you, of course. You guys are all making comics, to me, better than ever nowadays. But the numbers, unfortunately, don't reflect that. But yet you look at you already talked about it. You talk about manga, you talk about anime, and it seems like they are pumping out these huge numbers. So what can we learn from how they're pushing their product to make it so that comics continue to just blow back up? Because I miss the days of seeing 400,000 copies of a book, 500,000, and I'm not because it's the number one, not because it's an anniversary issue, because it's X-Men 94.
Right.
That's it. What will it take that you've seen? Because I know you go to a lot of shops, you go to a lot of conventions, you work for arguably the biggest comic book company in the world. So what do you think needs to change?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I wish I had a crystal ball answer. Like, I feel like like our beloved Grasshopper. I think John, guy who owns a store that we go to, probably has a better insight into the boots on the ground element of it. My observation, especially post COVID, because that's the most interesting lab experiment, right? Anybody could possibly have. Manga went up at an exponential rate.
Yeah.
American comics went up, but not at the same rate, right? So the question is why? The easiest answer I have is that when you decide you want to try to read One Piece, you start at chapter 1. And if you ask anybody, any Spider-Man fan, hey, I want to get into Spider-Man, what should I pick up?
Different answers. Yeah.
Yeah.
There is no answer. You're not going to say go to Amazing Fantasy 15. Right. Or you're going to say well, if you want Stan and Jack, or this is where you start, or Stan and Ditko, you start here. If you want to go, Superior, that was a cool story. Let's start here. We don't have, but also because it's 65, 70 years worth of stories now, right? Yeah. It's a long time. The longest running manga, they are mostly continuous stories, right? It's same creative team for the most part, but 30 years worth of content. I forget which one is the actual longest. I feel like it might be the boxing one. That's been the longest running continuous manga, but you just go to issue 1. It's really easy, and we don't have that. So I think that the publishers are aware of that, and they're trying to figure out how to do that. I think the challenge is that they're trying to serve different fan bases at any given time, right? Yeah. So if you just decided, okay, in bookstores or comic book stores, doesn't matter, we're just going to go, this is Spider-Man number 1 from now on. And it doesn't even have to be the one that's coming out in April. It's we decided that, the Nick Spencer run is it, right? I'm just picking somebody out of a hat.
Right.
Because we feel like that is the most, Spider-Man of the Spider-Man that's modern. It would be an entry point for new people. It would turn off old people, right? So not literally old people, but older readers, established readers, because they're well, I don't need to read that again. I already read it. That's a challenge, right? Trying to do that. And then if you go, well, just read the Ultimate Universe. The Ultimate Universe is it. I feel like every time they do that, then they fold it back in to the main books, right? Because the Ultimate books, and I'm going back, I'm not even talking about the previous, the current Ultimates. That first Ultimate was supposed to be kind of like a reboot, where it was all right, we're just going to start this line and it's going to be cool. It's a great jumping on point. And they got incredible stuff out of it. You get Miles Morales out of Ultimate, right? You get really cool stuff. But then they stopped it, right? Because
then you get Ultimatum, and then it gets things get kind of crazy.
Right, exactly. So it's we're weird in that way. I think the other thing is that I could be completely corrected on this. I don't know of a lot of manga that have crossovers. I'm sure they exist. I feel like if they happen, they're special events. I don't think it's here's the 9 manga you've got to read together to get the full universe. That might exist, and I just am not aware of it. But any of the things, I follow certain creators, right? Like Urasawa is a creator who I love, Naoki Urasawa. He did Monster and Pluto and 20th Century Boys. And you pick any of his stories that you want to read, you read it, you go, that was amazing. And now you pick the next one, right? And you just keep going. It's not like that for us. So since it's such a different beast, I don't know what the fix is, like other than going, how do you create the thing that's new for the new audience? And the answer seems to be, you look at webtoons and you look at this, like you have to go where the people are. Yeah. So you've got kids on their phones, webtoons show up and they go through the roof. I mean, those things get millions of people. Yeah. Millions of people are reading those on their phone, which to me is just so antithetical. Like I think a comic is too small, right? Same. It's like, but I want to see like a cool splash page. I want to see a double page spread. People are okay just reading it. And then they get, an anime out of it because they're pretty good. And then, now Solo Leveling is like out as a big show. Huge show. It's crazy. So I don't know. I think that's the trick. And I know that, like I said, the big two are doing that to the best of their ability. They are trying to figure out ways to do, how do we do the vertical comics? How do we do new jumping on points for people? But it is such a big beast, and they do have to figure out how to wrangle characters that are, 25, 30, 40, 50, 60, 90 years old. I mean, Superman's going to be 90. Like we will be alive.
He looks good though. He
does look good. He still looks better than Henry Cavill. Yeah. I mean, we'll be alive when Superman's 100. It's crazy.
Yeah.
It's crazy. There will be a time on Earth when nobody on Earth will have been around longer than Superman.
Yeah.
Like that's bizarre. And so how do you sell that to somebody then? Then it does become this kind of weird, like, oh, he's always been there. It's my grandpa's superhero. Like it's that weirdness. And I wish I had some great, insight. Cause if I did, I'd be doing it.
Yeah. That's what I was thinking of. Like, yeah.
Yeah. Cause all you want is you want these things to get passed along to the next generation, right? You really do want, like, it's funny. I think about all the books and comics that I held for my kids. I don't think my kid looked at any of them. Like my son found his own stuff. He knew like, hey, this stuff is cool. He read some comics that he thought were interesting, ultimately landed in manga. That's what he likes. And then he's pulled me into that, and it's a thing that we share and I love it. But you look at, even the art that I loved and the books that I loved when I was growing up in the 80s feel so vastly different from what would have been even in the 60s. Right. And now you got to jump to the 1000, to the aughts. And now in 2020s, those are generationally different books. They look so good and different now. How could you send somebody back? Even if you just looked at coloring, right? The coloring. They're across the board. Like it takes so much for a book to look bad now. And then back in the day, it was like, okay, everyone's drawing with markers and you hope it prints right? You're doing color guides and hoping it's going to work. Just that alone, it's like somebody watching a black and white movie that doesn't want to watch an old movie. How do you convince them? It's tough. It's really tough. So I have a lot of sympathy for the people whose job it is to try to crack that and figure it out. I wish I had some solution. I think honestly, the best thing that we have going for us is guys like you. Honestly, it's people who are willing to go, hey, we love this stuff and you might love it too. Just check it out. Like it is, right? I mean, I don't know who gave you your first comic, right? Like, was it a friend?
I call that a love language. If you give a comic to somebody, that's a whole nother set of intimacy right there, because they'll never forget it. It's a gift that keeps on giving, honestly.
Yep. Yeah. It's true. It's totally true. And I think that's it, is that we have to be the advocates for comics, which of course is hard because you don't know what everybody likes and people have strong opinions and whatever, and whatever. But when you can go, hey, I really like this book, give it a shot. My wife's book club read Immortal Sergeant, which was really funny because they're not ladies. Nice. They've never read a comic in their lives. I don't think I turned any of them into comic fans, but they read a comic, You know, like they got it, and it took them a while, and they had to get taught how to do it. And you know, these are ladies in their 40s to 50s, but they did it. You know, they did it, and they were like, "Oh yeah, you can tell a cool story with pictures." You know,
Yes, you
we're
can.
getting them younger. Like I said, Dog Man. You know, when you think about like literally the biggest comics on earth are Dog Man, like.
My youngest son,
I would say
my
maybe
youngest son has
next to
every
manga.
volume.
Yeah. I mean, you know, just in terms of print runs and stuff. And thank God, because then hopefully those kids go, well, what's next? And then I love the fact that we also are at a time, and the indie companies do this great, is we just have a diversity of comics. They're not all superheroes.
Yeah.
Right.
That's the other thing. That's something that manga has always done. Like, you know, Hajime no Ippo is the boxing one, right? So it's like if you want to read boxing or you want to read about basketball, you want to read, they exist.
Romance.
Romance. Yeah. And we used to do that. You know, we used to in the 40s.
In the heyday, yeah.
You know, like
the romance comics and the
army comics. Yeah.
And it kind of went away. And now those things like they're like novelties, but then Heartbreakers, you know, becomes a breakout thing. And then, you know, becomes a Netflix show. Like, that's cool. So it's, you know, those creators, passionate fans, giving it to their friends, their family. I think that's the way. It's the only thing we can control, because none of the mega corporations are going to listen to a damn thing that we say.
That is true. And you could imagine about 20 years time, some young reader is going to then make the Dog Man returns, and it'll be the Dark kind of thing, you know, that happens. So I'm excited for something like that. But I feel like you've accomplished so much as a writer. I think you have a resume that makes most comic book fans blush. How do you stay motivated and avoid burnout, even with it something that you enjoy doing? Sometimes it has to be work, right? Sometimes it is just work. How do you avoid the 8 deaths of Joe Kelly when you're kind of being pulled in these different directions?
Oh, that's so funny. I'm sure I'm already well past my 8. I'm clinging on with my fingernails. I mean, again, you guys run a great interview. These are great questions. For me, what do I do? Well, partly it's, you know, remembering what I love, right? And it's like I said before, with cartoons especially, it's very easy for me to tap back into, this was given to me as a kid. I can give this storytelling to somebody else. You know, a lot of stuff obviously has happened to everybody in the last 5 and 6 years, right? I mean, it's like the before and after of the pandemic is huge, right?
It's like the Great Depression.
Yeah, basically, like it can't be overstated. Like it was huge. And sometimes I forget, and every once in a while I go be like, we used to wash fruit. Yeah. Like, not just fruit. We used to wash every single thing that came in from the outdoors.
Yeah.
Before it went into our house. Like, what the hell? Like, I always wash fruit, just to be clear, for the record. Yeah. I don't eat dirty fruit. But it was like we were washing things with bleach, and then eating it. Like, it was weird. I forget that how scared, you know, I was at a time. There was a particularly bad time where we had the intersection of the pandemic and the unrest that was happening during Black Lives Matter summer. Yeah. Like, there was a lot converging, and I found myself really depressed and in a very dark place. And leading up to that point, I like we said at the top of this, I like dark stuff. So I'm watching Handmaid's Tale, and I'm watching all these dark, you know, gritty things. And all of a sudden I was like, I can't watch any of this stuff anymore. Like, this is really rough, because I'm just punishing myself for this is my downtime. And then my son was like, oh, you want to see this My Hero Academia? Yeah. I was like, sure, I'll check that out. And cartoon, it's a little bit of a hyperbole to say cartoons saved my life, but to say that they saved my sanity is probably not an overstatement. You know, it's like sitting down with my son and watching anime, and especially that particular anime, like My Hero, being so hopeful and taking all of the elements of Western comics, right? Because obviously a love letter to superheroes, right? Not just what they do, but what we do specifically. Watching these kids just like try to do their best and help their friends and all this stuff it was a lifeline for me. It really was. So when I do hit my bumps in the road and I'm like, oh, I'm grousing about whatever, I just try to imagine that maybe there's a person that gets something, and whether it's they need an I Kill Giants because they've suffered something in their life, or or even the craziness of 8 Deaths, or just the laughs of Deadpool, or something that's just going to like help in some way, whether it provides an escape or a touchstone, that helps, right? Like that rejuvenates me for sure. Definitely just reminding myself like this is the best job I could possibly have, and be grateful and shut up and put your butt in the chair. That's always a good self-check. And blotting out a lot of the noise, like
there's a lot of noise. There's a lot of noise, especially if you peruse social media like you say you do. There's a lot.
Yeah. And I'm pretty sure that I've probably run my course with social media in general. Yeah. Like just because it really isn't fun. It feels like an addiction, which it's engineered to be, and we all know that.
Right.
Not even talking about like getting caught up in other people's nonsense, but just like the whole like dopamine hit of I'm just mindlessly flipping, and then all of a sudden an hour and a half went by. Like,
right.
What did I just do? So I have a feeling that's going on hold for me in the not so near future. But if you push away the noise, and then it just gets back to the fun of, I love Spider-Man. Like, I'm not going to not love Spider-Man.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to let, or, like Godzilla is another great example. Godzilla was just in Fortnite. Oh, I haven't played Fortnite. I haven't played Fortnite in years. And my son was like, Godzilla's going to be in Fortnite. I was like, okay, I guess I'll start playing Fortnite again, because I love Godzilla.
Right.
And it was magical. Like, it was magical to have this little stupid period of time where you could turn into Godzilla and go crush stuff. Totally. Super fun, right? And when you go like, okay, somebody made that for me to have that experience. I know, of course, there's commerce. I know they made it to make money. I know all that. But the direct, somebody made up something fun. I got to use it and have that fun. I just try to put myself in that headset as often as possible. And then the other thing is working with other creative people like that. This is a pretty solitary, writing is solitary. I'm mostly by myself. Like I said, I don't leave the house. Right. But then you connect with creative people. So that's the most fun, like trading emails with Pepe and, oh, what about this design? What do you think about this? It was amazing. Or I was just in touch with a writer the other day about some ideas that they had about something, and the back and forth was awesome, and my guys at Man of Action, when we talk about stories, it really is invigorating, and it helps get you over the hump of it's a job, it's commerce, it's whatever. And some of us are better than others, like Duncan Rouleau, he is like an idea machine. He's so creative all the time. It's like humbling, because you could just give him anything and they'll be like, well, what about this? And the story of that banana. And let's talk about why did they paint the color of that wall? I mean, maybe it was what their mother's eyes look like, whatever. Like, he's just so good at that. That gets me excited, and if you surround yourself with people like that, I think it helps, helps get you past the nonsense,
Yeah. Right. I think so. You were mentioning Godzilla. I actually went with this gentleman to go see Godzilla -1. And it was the first film in a very long time that made me feel compelled to write a review. And I think that's what happens when creatives come together and put their passion in it. It gets locked in that art form forever. It's still palpable every time you watch it. That passion gets locked in that sort of art form. And you were talking about animation and stuff like that, and how cartoons may have saved your life. quite frankly, I would say comic book saved mine. And it goes back to this idea that I'm not trying to be these, paragons of virtue. It's more so I'm amazed and inspired by regular old humans, some from Freeport, who managed to, go. There's no way that no writer goes through horrible stuff. Think of even the person who's writing Dogman, right? Like,
Right.
who knows what dark stuff is happening there? But what are they giving back to this world? And I feel like that energy is in constant motion. I feel like it's reciprocal. I feel like you put good stuff out, it comes back to you. That energy kind of comes back to you. And with everything that you've like already achieved, what dragons, or I guess giants, are left to slay for the mighty Joe Kelly? Is there still like pie in the sky sort of dream stuff that you have, or is it more so like a little bit more animation, a little bit more film, a little bit more prose kind of stuff?
Yeah, I think there's still. I mean, I would love to write and direct a feature for sure. Like I did a short film I'm proud of, but it's it's a tough. When for me, if I'm working creatively as a professional, to be able to like hit pause on that and then dedicate time to do even a short film, I find a little challenging, like the gear shifts and just the realities certainly of like shipping a bi-weekly book it's hard to do that. So then to do a feature, it's like, well, that's a big deal. That would take some time, but that I would really love to do. I think I'd like to try prose, but it's not necessarily like a dragon I want to kill. It's like, it would be interesting. It would be interesting. I do think that, probably as a result of these last couple of years, to try to figure out what my, like, okay, I've consumed all of this shonen stuff, right? Whether it's the manga or it's the anime, what would be my version of that? Like, what's my, like, I'm never going to say what's my One Piece, but it's like, what is my, like, totally brand new world that I just want to be in and drag people through and have fun and try to have a capital A adventure.
Yeah.
That I'm kind of inspired to take a shot at. And it's funny because Ken would actually be a really good candidate for that, but we want to finish the trilogy part first, right? So we got to finish that, then we'll see what comes next. But I think that would be really cool. Yeah, other than that, I want to get better at riding motorcycles. I want to get off of Long Island. There's some life stuff, but yeah, creatively, it's I got in this to do movies originally, and I'm very lucky that my path took me to comics. So there's some characters that it would be fun. Like, I've never written Batman. It'd be pretty interesting for me to do that, even if not for a long run, but for like maybe a mini or a maxi series or something. There's a couple of characters that might be cool. I've always loved the Spectre just because I like horror and weirdness. So that would be really cool.
He needs an updated attire, man. The green undies, walking around like that with the green undies and cape. I don't know, man. I love the character, but I'm like, I'm not cosplaying that. I'm not going out there like that.
It's a look. It's definitely that is definitely the old wrestler inspired look. Yeah. And I think the other thing, because I play a lot of games. I do love video games. So to do an original IP that we, I or we, meaning like the guys, generate, would be cool. We haven't really had that experience yet. We've come on to other people's projects and have been at the ground floor of stuff. I mean, I was, Joe Mad created Darksiders, but I was there for that, with him and helped write that first game. But to really start something totally from scratch would be super cool. So I think those are the ones that are left. Movie, video game, do my own shonen. Irish guy shonen.
Hey, I dig it. Fusion. That's fusion right there.
There you go.
I think it works. Right. I think it works.
Shonen Jump presents Groundskeeper Willie.
You see why he's the ideas man, right? This is
yeah, that's it. You're already there.
I get it. This has been an amazing conversation. Thank you for giving us so much of your time. This is actually our very first interview. You are our very first interview. Yes, you are number one. This is the first issue of this hopefully ongoing series where I would like to talk more to creators, because again, I think that they're the true superheroes behind these books. They're the ones that are busting their butts to meet deadlines, writer's block, all the various, and the noise, all of the stuff that ends up kind of getting in the way of true art. You guys are on the front lines and giving the stories that I do honestly believe save lives. So, thank you first and foremost for not only giving us your time for this interview, but the time that you've given to the business, all the businesses
thank you. That's very kind of you. I literally can't believe this is the first time you've interviewed somebody. I mean, like, seriously, like, I'm not blowing smoke. Like, I mean, I've talked to Alex before. I know Alex can talk. I know I ramble a lot, but those are awesome. You guys had an incredible question. No, that was really good. I very much appreciated it. And I can just tell, like, we had talked before, setting this up. It's like, you guys are positive. It's like, this is what we need, right? It's like, this is what we want, is just to get the word out. Like, hey man, the water's fine and there's something for everybody.
Yeah.
And just, we can all find a cool thing, and it's okay if you don't like certain things. There's something else here that's good. It's plenty. So I really appreciate what you guys are doing. And this was great. I'm sorry if I rambled on too long, because I could have done this. Alex knows. I'll just be like, blah, 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 and 3 hours will go by.
This is why this was great. I knew I was like, if we're going to start this off, I got to have Joe, because Joe, you like to talk. You have a great history. I mean, it's crazy to think how many, there are things you mentioned. Darkseid. I never realized you wrote Darksiders, and I love that game. You know what I mean? So it's like, wow, like you're in touch with me and so many other people and things that they don't even realize. And I love telling people, oh, you love Deadpool, you love Ryan Reynolds, this and the third. Look up Joe Kelly and make sure it's not the baseball player. Okay, make sure it's the writer, because if you love Deadpool, you gotta read Joe Kelly, and from there, I guarantee you're gonna want to read so much more of it. I've handed people I Killed Giants, and they have become comic book readers from it. So, yeah.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that. I really do. I do.
Go out, get some of these amazing books that Mr. Joe Kelly has written. Amazing Spider-Man all around the corner. We're in a like you were talking about before, an embarrassment of riches when it comes to creators, when it comes to writers, when it comes to creator-owned books. Rising tide raises all ships. Everyone's firing on all cylinders. So there's definitely some exciting stuff to come, especially from Amazing Spider-Man. But thank you so much for this interview. And now, that you've been in issue 1, the origin story of this, you now have to return, right? Because we,
of course,
dumb. He's
That's right. To be continued.
He's back. We got to leave the people wanting more. Put a little post credit in this, and
perfect.
Get you back on.
It sounds good. And then I'll do a dramatic plot twist. I'll try to be like the most terrible human next time you talk to me. I'll just be like, oh, that's all bad. I'm just going to tell you who sucks in the industry.
And it's like, oh,
you got to come back. You got to come back with an emo haircut,
There you go. That'll be our gritty reboot. Yeah. What happened to this is character assassination? Hey, listen, got to get with the times.
We got Zack Snyder involved. Netflix fired him, so he wants to come over here.
It's a whole thing.
Oh, perfect. All right, I'll be right now. Anytime, guys. It's such a pleasure, and really appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, thank you so much. And we like to tell the people who watch all our stuff to remember that you are worthy. Thank you, guys.